All right, guys, we're ready.
All right.
Fantastic. All right. Hello, everyone. So welcome to this little conversation. We're going to have three-way conversation between me, Fooly Cooly, known on Twitter as Mashcore for Mums, and Logic Guy, nice friend of the channel here. So we're going to have a nice cordial conversation about leftist praxis, culture, and all that fun stuff. Logic Guy actually has prepared kind of an opening statement to introduce us to the stream.
It's an introduction to the terms of debate and the different sides being represented. Yeah.
Cool.
So I guess I'll just read that for you, unless anyone has any objections.
Go right ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So, you've read 15 pages of Das Kapital, and you've got the gist of it. You're 20 years old, probably. You live in a basement. You're unemployed. Your prospects are grim, and you're wondering, we all are, what is to be done about this culture war? Do you have to throw out your Woody Allen Blu-rays? Does Triumph of the Will pass the Bechdel test? Are the Lizzo gifts you relentlessly post online cultural appropriation? What's an appropriate Christmas gift for your wife's boyfriend? The way you see it, you've got two options. One, you become a soy boy SJW cuck, quivering in your safe space. What about the toxic masculinity on blatant display in the Joker you tweet before being admonished for not centering trans voices? You promised to do better. Yeah, you used to stand ContraPoints, but ever since her remarks about Ghostbusters 2016, you're worried she's gone alt-right. Or option two, you take the brown pill and you join the Nazbol party. But ironically, racism is praxis, actually, and nothing builds class solidarity like reciting the 14 words. Also, for some reason, you now post 4chan trad memes about how dildos are destroying society. It's all in good fun, though, until someone slightly criticizes you, in which case you get really defensive. Or hey, there's always the third way. You could live as a coward, straddling the fence, afraid to take a side. Maybe both sides have a point, you mule in your nasally screech you've found your voice affecting ever since the 2016 election. Your friends and family look at you in disgust. Didn't you used to be a man? There has to be another way. Well, that's what we're here to find out today. We've got a no-holds-barred Mexican standoff of discourse for you on leftism, the culture wars, and the way forward. Here to represent ironic racism and to sneer at your favorite bread tuber, we have dirtbag, stupid poll personality, Fooly Cooly. Fooly Cooly, say hi.
Hi, that's me, definitely. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. On the side of the ill-tempered, blue-haired cultural scolds, we have Jangles ScienceLad. Justin, say hi.
Hi.
And occasionally chiming in to say stuff like, I agree with some things you say, but disagreeing with other things and other dumbass, useless garbage. We have noted shitposter Logic Guy. That's me. You can call me Dan. Thank you for tuning in to this important debate on the symposium on leftism and culture.
That was beautiful.
It really sums everything up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think you captured our energies perfectly, if somewhat problematically.
It was problematic. Yeah, I'm being admonished. We're getting a lot of hate here. Logging off.
Good job, dude.
I'm logging off to do some self-care after all the negativity I received.
Very nice. All right, so I cannot think of a better way to start, and yet I am speechless. So, Fooly Cooly, this is kind of not necessarily your idea, but you kind of wanted to come onto a stream in the past a little bit and talk about kind of where you're coming from, why you do the things you do on Twitter and maybe elsewhere. Before we start, is there anything that you want to plug, or do you just want to get straight into your talk, to your ideas and put them in the marketplace?
No, I don't really have anything to plug. I just sort of tweet and do this. I mean, I guess where do we sort of start? Because we've got like a lot of questions really revolving around all of this. I mean,
I think a good place to start would be to summarize your political position in a nutshell.
So, in a nutshell, it would be essentially full democratization of the economy achieved through minimal infringement on, civil liberties. So I don't know what you'd call that. If you'd call that like a libertarian socialist, you should call that anything. But
you usually describe yourself as a democratic socialist, right?
Yeah. So ideally through, democracy.
Yeah. So, like, what are the things that define democratic socialism apart from other brands of Marxism?
Well, essentially, just everything's controlled democratically.
But
mean,
isn't that true of socialism in general, or am I misunderstanding?
um, socialism literally just means, just the economy is owned by society. And I guess you could say, okay, well, let's take it into the hands of the state, and all the smart people, in inverted commas, get to decide what goes on and sort of have control over it.
So what I understood the term to be, and maybe I was wrong about this, I thought a democratic socialist was someone who favored democratic means of bringing about a socialist state as opposed to like violent revolution like Marx talked about.
Well, definitely violence, avoiding violence is like ideal. We don't want to, we don't want to
is it ideal, or is it the means by which you are making you're doing politics? Because there's a difference between those two things. Almost everyone would probably say violence isn't ideal. Ideally, we'll just get the things we want. But I think it's a willingness to use violence to a political means that I think is the key.
Right. Ideally, no violence then. But I'm not really 100% like. That to me, that's just the things people would agree on.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you told people that okay, we want all of the economy to be controlled directly by the people, plus we want but we don't want to use violence. We don't want to have to resort to violence. We don't want to have to and we don't want to infringe on people's personal rights. That's something most people would be on board with if you actually explained it as that.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
I feel so. I feel like.
Okay. I just want to get into some terminology here. So first of all, and this is just for when I say it. You might use the terms differently, but during this debate, I might say leftist, and I also might say on the left. The distinction there for me is that if I were to say a leftist, I mean essentially a Marxist or an anarchist. Whereas if I were to say someone who's on the left or even a lefty, that could mean anyone from, from Lenin to Hillary Clinton. Like on the left or lefty just means, left of center essentially. It's a much broader term. Like you can think of it kind of like as capital L left versus lowercase l. Like sometimes I think it's necessary to just describe, the full left of center spectrum. Other times I think it's important to draw a distinction between liberalism and leftism.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. There's another term that we should get into, class reductionism. What does that mean to you?
I think it's sort of just I think it's a term that people have decided to use to sort of make a false accusation that someone who is placing the prime. So my argument would be around this would be that class is the primary social conflict, and it's an inherent one, right? You can't just like reform capitalism so that the classes get on. You have to make a final like sort of you need to get rid of class. That's all. And so and so people will take that and say, oh, actually, well, you're saying this, so ergo you don't think that racism is wrong, like you don't think homophobia is wrong, you don't think transphobia is wrong. I don't think that at all. I don't think those things aren't a problem. I think that those issues and like the attitudes that drive them, we confront those through class solidarity. You don't really Uh, um,
Well, I think we get it. You're a admirer of Adolf Reed, right?
yeah, I'm a big fan of Adolf Reed.
Okay, so here's a definition that he put forward of class reductionism from that New Republic article that I'm pretty sure you've read.
Yeah.
Class reductionism is the supposed view that inequalities apparently attributed to race, gender, and other categories of group identification are either secondary in importance or reducible to generic economic inequality. It thus follows, according to those who hurl the charge, that a specifically anti-racist, feminist, or LGBTQ concerns, for example, should be dissolved within demands for economic redistribution. Is that a definition that you find agreeable?
I mean,
In terms of how like people who use the term class reductionist would frame
Yeah.
it.
I mean, if you read the paragraph after that, yeah, that's the second paragraph after that would be. I mean, that's the definition of what people use it, but I don't agree with that. That's a thing.
Right. So Adolf Reed goes on to say that I know of no one who embraces that position. So
Exactly. Yeah.
So people on your side of things regard the term class reductionist as kind of like a slur or a smear would be a better.
I wouldn't say a slur. I mean, that's
Accusation.
it'd be, I think it's really a what would you call it? A
smear?
concern troll.
Okay.
Concern troll.
All right.
Okay.
Fair enough. Although he says, I know of no one who embraces that position, but later on in the essay, he does concede that there is a strain of this, but he just says it's much more marginal than liberals make it out. So what's your big distinction between a leftist and a liberal then?
Well, I mean, someone who isn't, someone who, sorry, I'm completely out of it at the moment. Obviously, someone who isn't a liberal is someone who isn't completely committed to, dismantling, not dismantling, but getting rid of capitalism, changing it to something else.
I mean, a liberal isn't just not committed to it, but a liberal, in fact, believes in upholding the status quo to a certain extent.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, and that makes sense. And I mean, is that the distinction that a liberal is someone upholding the status quo and a leftist is someone dismantling it?
Yeah.
Okay. And like what in the words of a liberal, like what are the aspects of the status quo that they want to preserve in your opinion? That's kind of asking you to mind read a little bit, but just steel man the position for us.
Well, they sort of want to just make sure that their class position, whatever it is, that they're still comfortable, that they're comfortable with their place in society, and they're just sort of just like expecting, other people, like the things they don't like, the social issues, they sort of reduce it down to just attitudes. So they sort of just like point things up.
An example of that. What's an example of a liberal reducing politics down to attitudes?
Well, like today, I'd say, Charlotte Climate on Twitter.
Okay,
is someone.
I saw her tweet recently. I wonder if it's the same tweet I've seen.
The one about Bernie Sanders talking about.
Was it a response to Bernie Sanders at the debate where
Yeah.
I didn't. Did anyone here watch that debate? I did not.
I did not, unfortunately.
I watched a bit of it.
Did you see the part in question that we're talking about?
No. He said something about the question was about race, and he talks about climate change, which is obviously
I did see that. Yeah.
Right, and so basically, Charlotte Clymer was a Hillary Clinton surrogate, and she now reps an organization called HRC, but HRC doesn't stand for Hillary Rodham Clinton. It stands for Human Rights Campaign, and they're like an LGBTQ organization in Washington, I think. And so they're basically a lobby, and I think they're kind of a wing of the Democratic Party. And so she and a bunch of other blue checkmark liberals kind of jumped on Bernie's answer for because they saw it as inadequate to talk about climate change in terms of race. That wasn't the thing he was supposed to say, according to them.
Yeah, I mean, they're not expecting material solutions.
Right.
Material, like, they're expecting, like, moralization over, terrible attitudes, but you can't just, like, just treat racism and sexism and homophobia as simply just attitudes that come from, nowhere. I
want to get back to that, but real quick, did you see my tweet about that Charlotte Clymer tweet?
No, which one was this?
I quote tweeted her and I said, "The experts on running campaigns into the ground really want Bernie to start saying about white fragility," which is kind of them in a nutshell to me. They really put they believe in a very narrow terms in which we can talk about race, and they're completely uncomfortable and accusatory about anyone who doesn't do so within those terms that they're very comfortable, even if those aren't the terms that POC themselves embrace, like Latinx as kind of come under scrutiny recently for not really being embraced by the Latino community. And I mean, I know tons of people from Latin America, and I've never heard one of them use the term, so it tracks for me. That quote from Charlotte Clymer is a key example of kind of what I would call them neoliberals, not liberals, but what that side of things kind of gets wrong about politics. But you said what were you saying? It's not enough to understand. What were you saying about racism?
Well, I mean, you can't divorce these kind of social movements away from the class core of it, because fundamentally, if you're fighting for the rights of people of color, LGBT people, all sorts of I don't like using that term, but marginalized identities.
Why don't you like using that term?
I just don't. It's just something about the term margin. I mean, I'm not denying that they're discriminated against. I just don't like. It's just a term that doesn't really describe. I just don't think it describes correctly what I'm talking about when I say that.
So you don't think that marginalized is a good term for who?
For people who have been discriminated against on a social, interpersonal social level.
What term would you prefer to use?
That people have been discriminated against.
Those seem pretty close to me, I have to say. People who've been discriminated against and marginalized people, those seem pretty close.
Yeah.
I can kind of understand what you mean. I myself frequently, I don't like language that to me that seems to come out of intersectionality classes in the college campus. I tend to be kind of uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
I just ridiculed some of it earlier when I said Latinx and white fragility, language like that. Even if I end up finding it useful, POC kind of is a useful term, I still kind of bristle at it, and I still won't say person of color. I'll always say POC just because I just have grown to resent the term so much, even though I recognize that it's actually a pretty useful term.
Yeah, here's the SJW got to pop in. I actually like the term marginalized, because what marginalized means is literally pushed to the margins, pushed to the periphery. So it's just something outside of what is considered center. So if you have a white majority, then everyone who is not white is pushed to the periphery in terms of what is supposedly default. Same thing with people of color and LGBT people and all that stuff. So I don't think it. I think it's perfectly fine.
It's just semantics and stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like it's very much a question of style. And while the SJW side of things kind of takes a tiptoe style or a very dry academic style, the dirtbag left does the opposite. They embrace a style of vulgarity.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the entire point of the dirtbag left is political vulgarity, which I mean we can get into, but I mean I guess we were talking about something else.
Well, do you have, if you have more you want to say about like how to best address racism, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I'm not an expert at all, but what my opinion essentially is on this is essentially you address you can't go out and talk to people and use terms like you said, white fragility. People get turned off by that, and I'm not talking just white people. There are, you know, people from other backgrounds who don't like these kind of terms. You can't just be 100% academic with it, because, you know,
I do think using these terms that are very much like critical race theory comes out of Harvard. So you're using language that comes right out of not just academia, but the most elite, arguably the most elite academic setting in the world. That's by definition not going to be a language that is that is accessible to others. So I think that I kind of made a list of like areas where like I sort of agree with the dirtbag left, and criticism of like intersectionality and the language, especially like my main criticisms of intersectionality really boil down to language and semantics. I think the language they use is inadequate and divisive. But
Yeah.
before we get into that, we should probably define like what. So you see yourself as a member of the dirtbag left, or like you would define yourself that way, using those terms.
I suppose so, yeah.
And what does that mean?
Well, I think it's an awkward term basically used to describe this kind of like revival of left-wing political vulgarity. I think what has happened is, I mean, in the past, left-wing, like everything about the left wing was considered, you know, immoral. It was the what was considered moral was really decided by you know, conservatives for a long time up until recently, and when liberals have sort of, you know, the moral standard or whatever by society has been is now very liberal. It's very, and that's a good thing. But what with sort of.
So what's an example of so you're saying that the moral standard of society used to be conservative and now it's liberal. Like when did that switch happen?
I would say sometime around 10 years ago.
So around 2010?
Something like that. I would say around that kind of time. It was very, very gradual. That's fair. That's very recent. I have to say. So that was 2010. That was the wake of the global recession and the election of Barack Obama. Pretty much right around that time. Yeah.
And so do you think those either of those two things kind of ushered in this kind of liberal status quo as opposed to the conservative status quo?
I wouldn't know. Yeah, I mean, someone just in the chat just mentioned Lady Gaga and Glee. Those were big things that have sort of like in the culture that sort of just like switched things to away from, you know, up until that point it was very, very normal to be homophobic and stuff, and then by the end of like Glee being on TV.
Oh, Glee! I didn't hear what you said before. You were talking about
the
Glee,
the show.
Yeah,
the show Glee.
I've seen Glee.
That was a very big shift in the culture, I think.
Yeah, do you think that was a good thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that too, right? So,
right. But I think what it is that's not something that people have decided to do. People didn't just decide, oh yeah, we're gonna stop doing homophobia. I think what happened was, you know, LGBT people became more of a force in the market, and because they had more money, and then because they had more money, then they became more socially acceptable. That's what I think.
Do you think there was a significant class shift in LGBT people since then?
Justin, you go first.
Do you think there was a significant shift in class for LGBT people in that short period of time, or do you think that I agree. It did become more marketable to appeal to LGBT people, but
Yeah. I don't think there was a class shift. I think it was just, the more acceptable it was on on that level, then the more marketers sort of seen that and gone, oh, okay, well now we can't really afford to be homophobic.
right. And even though that's not dismantling capitalism, I think we would all agree that that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, that is a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm not. What I'm saying from there
I'm not sure I buy this theory, because we're saying that an escalation of gay people into the middle class propelled combated homophobia and resulted in a lessening of homophobia. But this coincided with the greatest loss of wealth and among the middle class in several generations, the global recession. So objectively, at this time, people were getting poorer.
Yeah.
And when we've spoken online before, you have pointed to the 2008 housing crash,
Yeah.
as a major cultural force.
Yeah.
Something that impacted the culture great. But either way, so other like when we say that things transition from a conservative status quo to a liberal status quo, like what's like is the only example of that like corporations putting gay pride flags in their like logo once a month, once a year or something? Are there other more tangible examples of this?
I don't know. I just think that, ultimately what is the culture and what's socially acceptable is controlled by what's for sale, essentially.
Sometimes, but also there are a lot of instances, especially on an individual level, where that's not the case, right?
Like what? What's an example of that?
So, for example, I don't want to get personal, but let's say somebody's family disowns them for being LGBT. That's not a class issue.
No, that isn't at all. It's an interpersonal.
Right, but it's still steeped in culture that may be related to class, but not wholly contained within it. So these issues can be tackled from a multitude of different ways. I would not say that class is unimportant when looking at marginalized communities. I wouldn't say that at all, despite the fact that I'm super SJW. But also we have to look at them. There's certain issues that class is only part of the story, and we need to address the other parts as well. So when Glee and Lady Gaga were coming out and making it more socially acceptable to be openly queer, all of these things were good, despite not addressing a lot of the class issues that marginalized communities faced. But they addressed some of these social issues. And with society changing, that actually opens up more opportunities for these people. You're more likely to be open at work. You're more likely to be happier at work, even if you are under capitalism. And so, so there's room for talking about culture issues, even within the greater push for class consciousness and class equality, or class abolition.
I'm not saying that there isn't. I think that what my position is on this is essentially you can't put identities. I don't agree with what I call identity conflict politics. I don't agree
Is that the same thing as IDPOL, identity politics?
That's what I think. That's what I think IDPOL really is identity conflict politics. Politics of saying that identities are in direct conflict with each other. I don't think they necessarily are. I think that the attitudes that you're talking about are real and need to be addressed, but you address them through we fight identity conflicts through solidarity in the class conflict.
Okay, so it's important to build solidarity along a class plane rather than along the race axis. Is that
absolutely
fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And in your mind, the dirtbag left is at the forefront of doing that.
Not necessarily.
Okay, so then what's the appeal of the dirtbag left then? Because I kind of thought that was it exactly.
Well, I mean, it's essentially just, sorry, I say essentially a lot.
It's okay.
Effectively,
much better. 100% improvement. Much better.
Basically,
explicitly.
Explicitly. It's about being vulgar, and it's about making it's about making people who believe that political discourse has to fit to a certain amount of rules that they control, and essentially giving those people the middle finger.
Wait. Say that again. It's about people and rules.
People who believe that there's a set of like rules and decorum to political discourse.
That's a way of controlling us.
Right.
And the dirtbag left is about flipping the finger to that and disrupting it.
Right, absolutely.
And who are like the people who do that most effectively within the dirtbag left? Now, who are the luminaries of the dirtbag left, in your opinion?
I mean, definitely the Chapo guys.
They haven't really embraced the term, though. Like I've read their book, and they don't use the term once in their book. They've kind of left it behind, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not really a thing. It's not really. It's a
thing, but it's not like an organ. It's like the alt-right. The alt-right's not an organization. You don't join the alt-right. You don't have a
right.
It's
yeah.
a descriptor.
Yeah, but I'm really interested in what you said that's rules and decorum are means of control. I don't think I'd necessarily disagree with that. But why is it good inherently to disrupt them?
When they're being used cynically.
They're being used cynically.
Because
so, can we get an example of rules of decorum being used cynically and disrupting them?
I mean, the problem with using
let me see if I can come up with an example of what I think you might be talking about, and you can tell me if you agree with this or not. So a lot of big lefty accounts will make fun of people like Dan Crenshaw. They'll on purpose, they will make fun of the fact that he has lost an eye to try to tear him down, saying that, hey, you can't use this status as a shield for shitty politics. We're going to cut right through that. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
That's absolutely the case. I mean, if you saw that thing on SNL where he was like,
he made them apologize, and they did it like a bunch of pussies. Yeah,
right.
And what I find especially objectionable to it is, that's an example of decorum shielding Dan Crenshaw, but it's also shielding this very American deference and reverence for the war machine and the military-industrial complex that's baked right into it, that I think is ultimately far more pernicious than just Dan Crenshaw.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I saw something in the chat. Somebody said,
don't be looking at the chat too much.
Yeah.
I perused the chat as well. I wonder if you're going to bring up the same comment I was going to bring up.
Is it the one that says, wouldn't Fooly Cooly's idea of being vulgar actually result in alienating the exact group of people who you want to recruit, i.e. marginalized people who are sensitive to being slighted? And they're going to say, for example, it's hard for me to support the dirtbag left, while the same dirtbag left is insulting me, for example. And my response to that would be, I don't think the purpose is to insult you directly. Obviously, I'm assuming from their username this person is an Asian person, and I wouldn't necessarily say that it's okay to. I mean, obviously, don't go after people for being like Asian and stuff. Don't do that, but do go after people who cynically use their position as their supposed view, like anti-racist positions, to go after people who are like talk about how how they don't like racism, how they don't like sexism, all this thing, but they don't support materially backed change.
So Fooly, I think that question that wasn't the one I was gonna hone in on, but I think it gets right to the center of it.
Yeah.
Because do I think that promoting vulgarity will necessarily end up in alienating marginal people, or whatever term we're preferring for it? No, I don't think that at all. I think that, like, the example that we just all agreed with is a great example of using vulgarity and it not doing that. But what brought on this conversation is that we've all seen members of the self-professed members of the dirtbag left, from Amy Therese to the Red Scare girls, to a whole bunch of like Twitter personalities that are awful, to you personally, using it to do that. For like, just an example of that I know that you have done is that for a while and I asked you to change it, or I said that you should consider changing it at least. You were using a display name Ian Miles Ching Chong. Yeah, that's hard to defend as not alienating people who we need to unify with. That's hard to defend.
I mean, it depends if you get the joke.
So what's the joke?
The joke is me being intentionally saying something I intentionally recognize as.
Hey, I'm sorry.
No worries.
I gotta get that.
Yeah, you can continue talking.
I don't know why my phone is ringing. I'm kind of annoyed by it, to be honest.
You can keep going though.
Right. I mean, obviously, I don't actually think that. I don't think that's an acceptable thing to say, but it's sort of a show of force against people like Ian Miles Chong, who think that
All right, I'm back.
We will just sit here and be like, oh, you can't, you can't say certain things. Like we'll say whatever we want. And in certain situations,
but how does changing your display name to Ian Miles Ching Chong not alienate? How does it help class solidarity? How does it not alienate people?
That's not the point. Isn't to help class solidarity. And I mean, I understand why it might alienate people, but it's not about alienating people. It's about exposing other people's inherent biases. It's about making it's about making people to the right of you uncomfortable.
Did it make people to the right of you did it make uncomfortable?
People who,
like Charlotte Clymer types?
See, I think I get where you're coming from. It's to show that we can sling mud with the best of them. We can get down in the dirt and play dirty just like the people on the right.
Pretty much, yeah.
But what that is, things like that do in effect is say that my position on anti-racism is conditional.
Not necessarily.
It is, though. You're being ironically racist because it's against someone that you don't like.
Yeah, but the key word there is ironically.
Yeah, and being ironically racist.
When you say the key word there is ironically, what are you saying, that the irony diffuses it?
Well, the irony is I don't actually think that. I don't think the joke is that he's retweeted an insult against himself.
Yeah, an insult based on his race against himself.
You could have changed your display name to Ian Miles Chong Smells Like Piss.
I could have, yeah.
And that would have satisfied all conditions, and you could have done that. You specifically chose not to.
And I'm not sure if you're using the word ironically correct there. You are.
I will defend the use of his word, of the term ironic, because irony is when you say something that has the opposite of the intended or expected meaning. So if you say
that's why it's not correct there. The intention there was to insult Ian Miles Chong on the basis of his race. Full stop. It wasn't the opposite of that. That was the exact explicit purpose, to insult Ian Miles Chong on the basis of his race. That is not ironic racism based on that definition of the word ironic that we just used.
No, I don't think so, because I don't have anything against Ian Miles Chong for being, Asian.
No.
I have I have things against him because his politics are terrible.
Of
And
course.
his politics are based on him being
But
racist.
how you completely jumped over his politics, made no remarks about them, and made remarks entirely about his race.
I mean, I get where you're coming from, but it's like, obviously the point is it's intentionally offensive. It's intentionally saying things that you don't agree with.
Uh-huh. I guess my concern, I think the larger concern on the left with ironic racism is that, yeah, I guess ironic racism could be like a cudgel against racism, but it can also provide camouflage for racism. And one thing we've seen in our culture recently is communities that are supposedly organized along ironic racism get taken over. And actually, I mean, arguably they were always racist, but essentially become mask off racists. And if you're a racist, if you're a white nationalist, and you're looking for a community, one where people are okay with saying racist things and they're not going to criticize you. And in fact, if someone criticizes you for it, they're admonished. That's going to be attractive to racists, and that's why these communities often seem surprised when actual racists show up, when they thought that they were just that they were just LARPing as racists, essentially.
I understand your point, but at the same time, like, if you're diametrically opposed to, you know, racism on an economic scale, then how would you be comfortable? How would someone who thinks that racism is good would be comfortable in that kind of, you know?
They would be comfortable because they're allowed to be as explicitly racist as they want. And in fact, if anyone dares criticize them, they're the ones who are admonished. That's pretty comfortable for a racist, I would say.
I mean, I wouldn't know. I'm not like a racist. So.
Well, see, I think that you would
Does it
know,
matter?
because, in my opinion, this is actually what we're seeing happening in certain corners of Stupid Poll and the dirtbag left. I think that they're accepting. I don't even think they're being taken over. I think they're accepting and welcoming voices that are actually getting increasingly difficult to dismiss as ironic, and including, I think the best example of this, Amy Therese was just written up with a glowing profile in a white nationalist publication.
I don't think Amy's a white nationalist.
But does that matter, though?
That's not what I said, is it? I said that she was written up with a glowing profile in a white nationalist magazine.
Right.
That's pretty difficult for me to dismiss.
That, I mean, I think that is a problem, obviously, and you don't want, you know, white supremacists to end up being Amy Therese reply guys at all.
Which she has a bunch of.
Yeah, sure.
That, right?
Right,
Amy
right.
Therese has white nationalist reply guys.
Does she? I mean, I don't pay attention to her replies.
Okay. You should probably pay attention to her if you're going to make a display name Anime Therese. But okay, you haven't paid attention. I have seen whenever and I'm blocked by Amy Therese, but whenever I go into her replies, the people defending her, some of them are leftists, a lot of them are conservatives, and a lot of them are pretty far right wing, and some of them are claiming to be left wingers, but they sound indistinguishable to me from fascists. They seem to speak the same language.
Right.
Have you not seen that yourself?
No, I haven't seen that firsthand.
Yeah,
So-
you don't have to defend all like Amy Therese's reply guys. I'm more interested in like what you think.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. But I do think that we need to. This isn't about defending it, though. This is about establishing that the phenomenon is in fact happening. I mean, Amy Therese is being embraced by white nationalist publications and a white nationalist following. That is happening, and I think it is important to acknowledge that.
Right.
So,
what did you say, Justin?
So I was gonna like kind of bridge that between what we were talking about. So let me see if I can sum up your position accurately and stop me if I'm doing a bad job. Okay. So when you say something like Ian Miles Ching Chong, when you have that as part of your Twitter profile, and you're using it as a direct insult against him, it's the entire purpose is to insult him and to make him feel bad and to show that you're not this sensitive person who's going to call, take offense at everything and call everything problematic, is to show that you can sling mud and be tough with the best of them. And the reason that it separates you from someone who is actually racist, someone who actually doesn't like Asians, is because you don't personally hold those views and are very public about your economic equality and economic prosperity and equality for different races, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So I summed that up pretty okay, but you can see how, like, your intent isn't necessarily the outcome. Things
Right,
happen,
absolutely.
yeah, that we don't intend to happen all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And can we also touch on the fact that saying, "Oh, I'm being ironic racist," and that's different from real racist because I don't really believe it. But racists very rarely are upfront about their beliefs. They usually hide their power level, so that just adds another level of obfuscation about it.
Right.
Okay, I don't want this to turn into just like you defending this one tweet you had. So is there anything... Yeah, okay. So is there anything... any criticisms you would level at me as a stand-in for the SJWs? You don't have to attack anything I've personally said, but you can attack... Well, if I have said something that you take issue with, feel free to.
Not really, because I think there's like sort of a false dichotomy between, quote unquote, the dirtbag left and quote unquote the SJW left.
Mm-hmm.
I think both of those things serve important purposes. And it's all about what community you personally feel comfortable in.
Okay. Yeah, and you know what? I agree with that. Ultimately,
if you want to be an edgy boy, you go hang out with the dirtbag left. If you don't like edginess and you don't like irony and you don't like people who aren't 100%, you don't want to hang around with people who aren't 100% woke on certain social issues, then you go hang out with that crowd.
Okay.
But the only thing I would criticize the quote unquote SJW left is essentially I feel like there's a lot of cynicism and very 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 a lot of distrust of people, especially working class people. I posted a tweet recently about comparing something Amber Frost said in a recent Jacobin article versus, the kind of attitude that guys like Fort Slime have with their approach.
So what did Amber say?
This was in the recent what can we learn from like Corbyn article in Jacobin.
What was your takeaway from it?
Can I take a guess of what the takeaway wasn't? My guess is going to be that calling everybody who supported Brexit and everybody who is conservative racist and problematic and terrible sure didn't seem to be a good strategy towards getting them to vote Labour. Is that somewhat close to her point?
No, it was something else. I think that was in the thing, but basically, yeah, what she said was, direct quote, "People do not need to be lectured on how to be good people because people are already good and we like them and we care about them and they deserve better." I think a lot of the approach from BreadTube and sort of that kind of approach is sort of coming with the assumption that everyone is a racist, that everyone is like by default bigoted. And I think people need to take into account there's a big difference between someone being, ignorant and someone being intentionally, harmful.
And then what was the Thought Slime comment? Because I didn't see that either.
Well, the Thought Slime comment was just basically, it wasn't a direct quote from him, but it was just comments he's made about, about him being someone educating people on how to not be shitty and stuff like that.
I mean, isn't that kind of what we're all here to do?
Not really.
The entire reason that we all have platforms is maybe to change other people's opinions and get them to think more like us, right? Otherwise, what are we doing here? Why?
I mean, absolutely, but I wouldn't phrase it like that.
So you agree with it, but you wouldn't phrase it like that. How would you phrase it?
I mean, I wouldn't call people bad people. I wouldn't assume.
I didn't call anybody bad people just now.
Well, no, you didn't. You didn't say you did.
Yeah, I said, but we do want them to change their opinions because we think their opinions could use some work.
Yeah, but I mean, my argument is to do that from a sort of perspective, coming from the place that of trusting people, trusting that most people are good people.
I got to a little bit call bullshit on this because you quoted a different recent Amber Ailey Frost quote recently. Remainers are the real racists because the concept of a European Union is white supremacist. So there is Amber Ailey Frost, and you praising her for it, embracing exactly the kind of moral scolding that she supposedly objects to when it's directed at others.
But it's not about it's about exposing the hypocrisy with that one.
They're the real racists, was her criticism.
Yeah, that's the hypocrisy, because the premise of a lot of the Remain rhetoric was, oh well, obviously everyone wants to remain. The only people who don't want to is a racist.
I think I can if I can take her tweet in good faith and I kind of like see what you're trying to come at it from fully, calling the Remainers racist probably isn't going to change their mind, right? It's probably really ineffective, even though they care about racism. But saying that, well, actually you're racist, you're the real racist, probably isn't a good way to like get them to change their minds. And that was the strategy that she was taking, right? Or that was her intended strategy. That's sort of close. Maybe. I mean, obviously you can't speak for her,
but... There's no
but...
reading of it that's not rank hypocrisy, because even if you agree that, oh, she's not lecturing them on racism, she's lecturing on them on hypocrisy, well, either way, she's moralizing. There's no reading of it that's not hypocrisy.
Yeah, I mean, moralizing about moralizing is moralizing, so...
Absolutely.
True. So, yeah.
This is the fundamental contradiction at the heart of this stuff that has me really critical of it.
Okay.
So what was you were about to say like your strategy and what you want to do on Twitter. Go ahead and like continue with that if you don't care.
Who, me?
Yes.
What I don't what
I'm sorry, I'll try to ask it again. So how we're kind of here. By here, I mean we're online to hopefully maybe change some opinions. Like we have a voice, we want to use our voice to do what we think is good in the world at the risk of moralizing. And we want people to kind of change their ways, even just a little bit, in order to achieve what we want to see in the world, right? That's a grandiose way of saying it, but, on any scale, that's kind of what we're here to do, right?
I wouldn't say change their ways, more change their outlook.
Change their outlook in order to, like, change their ways to achieve that new outlook.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so what is your strategy going forward to do that? I mean, you said you kind of want to, let's see, what was your thing? Full democratic economy through minimal infringement on liberties, you said was your goal at the beginning of the stream. So how do you hope to use your Twitter presence to do that?
I mean, I'm just one person. I can't really...
Of course. Yeah, so are all of us.
Right. I mean... I guess my approach would be to sort of infect other areas of the wider culture, because I think, I mean, if we go into the culture wars, I think why we're inherently going to lose that is because we're fighting if we try to engage with that, we're sort of fighting from we're sort of fighting for a specific culture and set of values, and that that contradicts with other things, right?
That seems like a valid thing to do. To fight for the type of culture you want to see seems like a valid and responsible thing to do.
Not necessarily.
Well, I agree, not necessarily, because
No.
if your values are garbage, then that's not a good thing to do. But to want to affect culture in a way that you see as positive is a very relatable and reasonable thing to do. Divorcing it from the specifics of what you're trying to accomplish.
But that's not how. But the problem there is, so for example, there was a tweet somebody posted. There was two tweets. No, it was a tweet. It was two screenshots, and on the same day, someone from Vox.com tweeted about how South Park was responsible for the alt-right, all this sort of thing.
I've definitely seen people say stuff like that.
And then on the exact same day, there was a video released by Joe Rogan. It was a clip of his podcast where he's smiling, his big smile on his face, and he's going, "South Park is the best show on TV." And I mean, if you're in the position where you're very apolitical, you don't know what politics would improve your life, and you sort of see, and you're a massive South Park fan, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you sort of see someone on Twitter and a bunch of people in their replies going, "Oh yeah, South Park is
problematic,
terrible, problematic."
You've got to scold everyone for liking South Park.
It's endemic of the alt-right, all this stuff, and then you see Joe Rogan talking about how your favorite show, South Park, is the best show on TV. Who's going to be your favorite person out of those two people?
One is inviting, the other is scolding.
Well, if you're a fan of South Park,
Right.
you're not apolitical. You have political opinions now.
I don't know.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, but some people will. I'm very comfortable saying that a lot of people's their political opinions are shaped through media. And South Park is a very political show. It takes stances on things.
True.
Oftentimes those stances are just, everybody's dumb, but that's still a stance.
Yeah. If I can just interject something though, to me the political parallel between South Park and Joe Rogan, both are political, both talk about politics. But with Joe Rogan, I get the feeling that Joe Rogan's not really convicted of much. He might have an opinion about this, he might have an opinion about that, but it's not unusual to hear him take an opposite opinion closely after that. So he's political, but he's not ideological, if that distinction makes sense. And I think South Park is actually pretty similar to that.
Right. But the problem there is, a lot of people think that Joe Rogan is a far right figure. I mean, he does have quite right wing people on his podcast, but you've sort of backed yourself into a corner there where this 17-year-old kid who likes South Park is now culturally on the right, all because he doesn't have a specific coherent political worldview, but now because of the culture war, he's now on the right, inverted commas.
Yeah, this is an area where I really agree with you, Fooly.
That's probably when I disagree.
Distrustful of leftist doctrine that results in cutting yourself off and removing yourself from the conversation. Like, oh, don't go on that show, don't talk to that person. I think that is self-defeating. I think it boxes you in. And what you're describing, like what you're describing is like the mythos, or not the ethos, like set out by like the two big offenders are your nemesis, Movie Bob, and Noah Berlatsky. Those are like the big guys.
I don't know who the second one is, but I know Movie Bob.
Yeah. Fooly, can you describe Noah Berlatsky for us, for those who may not know? I'm not sure how I would say it.
He's like an academic who never stops tweeting and has an ongoing grudge with the Chapo Trap House people.
He has an ongoing grudge with a lot of people, and he's extremely pro. He wrote a book about Wonder Woman, I think, and he's extremely into lecturing us about the media we consume, and he had a tweet. He had a barn burner tweet recently, an all timer, where he said that They Live is a movie about anti-Semitism.
Right. Yeah, I saw that.
Which to me summarizes the entire problem with this, because any message that tries to address class will be coded that way. And people like him will be there to tell you that you're anti-Semitic for liking it and you need to watch Ghostbusters 2016 instead, which is a real...
Right.
Ghostbusters 2016, a film that has nothing to say about class at all. We're supposed to just clap because the women get to be Ghostbusters, apparently, in an unfunny movie that people don't like.
Yeah.
But I guess this is a reason why I think I am opinionated about the culture war, because I guess what activates me about the culture war is I remember a time when if you went to YouTube and you typed in, I don't know, the Jewish question or Medicare for all or whatever the thing is, the videos that would come up, it would be Sargon of Akkad, it would be Dave Rubin, it would be PragerU, and I want to see an end to that. I want to see when you type in, the first video that comes up is a BreadTube video, even if it's someone I don't like on BreadTube. I don't want to surrender YouTube or any corner of the internet to right-wing supremacy. I think it would be dangerous to do that.
Right.
That's where I come from on the culture war.
And that's sort of I want to go back to, because we can't just blame the algorithm. I think we sort of have to go back to the whole. I mean, because I do agree with the idea that there's like a quote unquote alt-right pipeline, right?
You do.
So
I'm surprised to hear you say that, because I've known people on a certain corner of left Twitter to be extremely critical of that.
I mean, to a degree, right? I think that I don't think that if you're going to watch a Count Dankula video, then in 6 months you're going to be all right. I don't think that's the way it works, right? I don't think if you watch a PewDiePie video 6 months down the line you're going to be all right. That's not how it works.
But that argument is a straw man. Like Mark Count Dankula makes this argument, and what he's doing is he's creating a false dichotomy where you either believe either speech and jokes are a form of mind control, literal mind control, or they have no effect at all. And of course the answer is neither of those. Both of those are actually crazy things to believe. It's crazy to believe that speech and jokes are mind control, but it's equally insane to not understand the influential power of culture that we're consumed in all the time. Right.
But my what I would tie into this is sort of, I mean, if we go back to this 17-year-old who watches South Park and then is appealed to Joe Rogan, or if you have like a 14, 15-year-old who likes PewDiePie and sees a tweet by Becca Lewis saying that, hey, PewDiePie is actually a Nazi.
Yeah.
That's sort of pushing people over to the, quote unquote cultural right.
Yep.
That's a big thing we need to address, I think.
I agree. Do you think that PewDiePie is pushing people over to the cultural right?
Not necessarily. I don't really know PewDiePie's political positions other than the fact that he's like a millionaire. He's probably like, I mean, I don't think he's like a secret Nazi or anything.
I mean, a secret Nazi is like, I feel like that's like I don't know what a secret Nazi is, but I mean, he did exploit Indian villagers to hold up a sign that said "Kill all the Nazis," and then pretend to take.
Well, he didn't say kill all the Nazis. He said something else, right?
I'm sorry. Yeah. Kill all the Jews.
Right.
I misspoke. He exploited Indian villagers to hold up a sign that said "Kill all the Jews," and then when people had a problem with it, he took, he was the one who got self-righteous about it, and
right.
I have personally met people who told me that they were mad at news outlets for factual reporting that explained what he did, and for some reason they find that to be morally wrong, but can't quite explain why. So I PewDiePie would be a figure I would be suspicious of. Right.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I understand why people have suspicions, but it's not just it's not just your PewDiePies and your Joe Rogans. A lot of it is your Vox.com reporters.
So what's the role of Vox.com reporters in this?
Well, essentially just pushing the idea that it's a cultural conflict when it's not, is it? It's inherently a class conflict, and a lot of people, all it is for them is just they're just consuming the culture that they've been given.
If there's no cultural aspect to the class conflict, does that mean our message to working class white people in Appalachia and our message to very poor black neighborhoods in Chicago should be the same?
I mean, you do obviously have to like tailor your argument to different people, and that's why I support the idea that there's both that quote unquote dirtbag left and quote unquote SJW left are both valid. They're both valid approaches. I don't think they're like conflicting ideas.
So who's all right? Instead of being antagonistic, I'm going to ask you, who's someone on the quote-unquote orthodox left that you think is doing a good job?
I mean, I wouldn't call it an orthodox left. Because,
I don't know what else to call it.
Idpol left? Identity conflict left?
Well, I mean, I as I say, I'm inherently against identity conflicts. I'm inherently against framing, it as in, white people versus black people or straight people versus gay people. I'm very much pro framing it in the context of, capitalists versus the working class, capitalists versus black people, capitalists versus LGBT people, because then we all understand we have a common enemy, right?
Yeah, in theory, yes. Less so if we embrace the language of what racist, then I think that gets diluted. But yes, in theory, I agree.
Right. I don't agree with that. No. Like
so
I wouldn't phrase it as. So you know what? When I say identity politics, I'm sorry, we're going back to defining definitions. To me, identity politics means finding your positions or basing your auditions in what you are. Or rather, giving validity to someone's position from the other side, giving validity to someone's position based on their identity. And I don't like that because that's very easily co-opted by the right. Dave Rubin's gay. Therefore,
right.
He's fine. He's our dude. He's one of the good ones. Mal Yiannopoulos, an objectively homophobic piece of shit, but he's gay, so he can't be. That's a shield. Jesse Lee Peterson, a black white supremacist.
Right.
So
exactly.
I'm definitely against using identity politics in that way too. But that doesn't mean, and I don't like framing it as straight people versus gay people. It's always homophobic people versus gay people, which could be separate from class conflict, and could evolve around it. Like just if we can change one quicker, why not?
I agree with you that it is obviously homophobic people. Homophobic people. I can't words today.
That's okay.
Homophobic people versus LGBT people, but you also have to acknowledge there that the homophobic people are a result of capital rather than just a moral failing of the working class.
What do you mean a failing of capital? There are rich homophobes and poor homophobes alike.
I mean, a result of capital, as in it is specifically homophobia exists to essentially divide the working class. It's a project of the these kind of attitudes, these kind of reactionary attitudes don't just come from nowhere.
Do they come from capitalism? Did homophobia not exist before capitalism? Or class struggle?
I mean, class struggle has existed forever.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure, like, rich and powerful gay people have been, I can't use the word oppressed. They've been, like, ostracized as well, right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So, and I don't buy this, homophobia comes from class struggle. I don't buy that. The same way I don't buy, it can certainly be a component of it, but there could be, and everybody's different. So for some people, it will be, I just don't like poor people, and this group of people tends to be poor. Of course, that could be a factor. But it also, there's, alternate ideologies that could also play a part into it. Religious people is the big one, right? There are rich religious people, and there are a lot of poor people who are religious. And sometimes that religion can result in a lot of bigotry. So that's completely separate from class, and it's something that we can address separate from class without completely ignoring class.
Is this like an economic anxiety argument, essentially?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, what I'm saying is that, homophobia is. I mean, if a better argument would be, racism. Why does racism exist?
Okay, why does racism exist?
Well, to justify the economic exploitation of people who don't look like you, to justify things like slavery, to justify things like.
So you think racism is a means to an end? Like, what I really want to do is economically oppress people, so in order to do that, I'm going to be racist arbitrarily. I don't actually hate black people. I just want an excuse to oppress people economically.
Pretty much. I mean, it's not a project of. It's not solely a project of what you'd call ethnic chauvinism. It's primarily a project of exploiting people.
Okay, I'm not sure it makes sense in my mind, but I don't know what phobia is, so I can't say, I guess.
I can say that's bull. That is it's primarily a result of class. Not
a result of class, not class, as a result of exploitation, as a result of wanting to exploit the labor of people.
And I agree with that plenty, but I mean, black people and white people have enormously different experiences in the United States because of a different history.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so that exploitation is real for a lot of poor white people and a lot of poor black people, but a lot of the history behind that exploitation is the same. Is not the same.
Of course.
Yeah, so
but it's the same means to an end. Is it not?
I don't think there is ends. I think
the end is profit.
The end is profit, but profit is a means to an end.
But so how do people profit from homophobia?
Well, I mean, it's more complicated than.
How do people profit from thinking that black people are violent?
Well, I think that there's actually a kind of a good answer on that. That that racism in our society, like all societies have had prejudice, but race hasn't always been the crux of it, well, the way it is in ours. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we have this history of horrific exploitation across race lines. So I think that that explanation does make sense.
If you were to tell me that the higher ups, the people in power, are artificially trying to exploit racial tensions in order to maintain their power structures, I would agree with you 100%. But that means that taking that away from them and resolving racial tensions by making it culturally unacceptable to express racist views or intentions could be a way of combating that. So they're intertwined.
What do you mean taken away from what?
So if people are trying to exploit racial tensions in order to gain economic benefits, I would agree with that. I think that there is a component of that, absolutely. But that means they're using culture to as a means for economic benefit, like keep people afraid of outsiders and foreigners and things like that for their own economic benefit to maintain their power structure, but making people less afraid of foreigners, less afraid of people outside of their in-group could also be a way of taking that away from them. So I don't know if I'm phrasing myself correctly, but I don't see this. It was almost like you said earlier. I don't see this huge dichotomy between attacking like the culture war and economic justice. Like if you approach one, you could be helping the other, or you could be helping them separately, but it's still good to do one of them. I feel like I'm not explaining myself well.
Yeah, I'm sort of confused at this point. I mean,
Hey guys, can I jump in for a second?
Please do.
go for it.
I just uploaded a picture to our Discord chat. Take a look.
This is Anna. I've seen this earlier. What about her?
Oh, it's just interesting to see her cozy up to the one of the leaders and coiner of the guy who coined the phrase intellectual dark web, Eric Weinstein. The two of them getting chummy is just interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I stopped listening to Red Scare like 6 months ago.
That's about the time I stopped listening as well. What caused you to stop listening?
Just wasn't really a fan of the hosts anymore.
They sound completely indecipherable from like Gamergate YouTubers a lot of the time. I know really started to put me off in the wrong way.
I appreciate that. It's just level of, I appreciate the spiciness. It just gets a bit much, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. Do you find that that's like a pattern on the, like, the dirtbag left of like constantly like hissing at left-wing figures while cozying up to right-wing figures?
Not really, because I mean, I think there are some people who do that, and definitely Anna and Dasha, and maybe Amy. I don't really know.
I would say Amy's probably the worst offender.
Yeah, I mean,
she's recently defended Milo and Richard Spencer for some reason that still completely baffles me.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I think she says that are like that are good takes, but a lot of things I don't really agree with. I mean, I think she's sort of coming from the position of, combining, left wing economics with, cultural conservatism, and I don't agree with that at all. I'm not really a culturally conservative.
She is very, very into that, and that seems like to be increasingly popular. Like, that's popular on Stupid. I don't know if you hang out on Stupid much. I kind of associate you as like a stupid figure.
I mean, I used to, but I sort of check it once a day. I don't really see that kind of thing. The idea of, I don't really see a lot of people expressing culturally conservative sort of things. I've definitely
seen a lot of them posting like trad memes very approvingly.
I only check it like once a day or so.
Well, that's more than I check it out. That's actually a pretty good amount of time. That's how often I check out the Dave Rubens.
The Dave Rubens on Reddit. Yeah, I mean, I don't really associate myself with like a certain group.
Okay.
I just hang around people on Twitter and Discords that sort of like I feel sort of are coming from the same perspective as I am, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I disrupted the conversation. I just thought that picture.
No, you saved me.
I thought it really summarized the problem as I see it. That the fact that it's easy to, like, I'm guilty of this. Like, I'll see people like use casually racist jokes and just kind of be like, well, they're being ironic. But at a certain point,
yeah, I do agree. There's a certain point. I just think,
and I don't think the certain point is being in a picture with Eric Weinstein, but it's just part of a pattern where they're increasingly approving of these like left wing of these right wing figures, and increasingly their venom and their vitriol aimed at left wingers, and their attitude towards right wingers is kind of like, they're okay. I don't know. I agree with some things, disagree. I think one of the things that puts me in this mind frame is like being a Dave Rubinologist and seeing the way that he very slowly, almost imperceptibly to some people, if you weren't paying close attention, revealed his true nature in a way that was so gradual some people could not see it happening. And I think that, and I worry sometimes that makes me being attuned to this can be useful, but can also make you paranoid. You can see it where you might think you're seeing it where it's not happening.
Yeah. Dave Rubin is a part of a class of people that I wanted to talk about, not class, but as sort of a character type online that includes people like
Eric Weinstein. It includes Eric Weinstein.
And Tim
Does
Pool.
it?
Oh yeah, they're
yeah. I was
good.
going to bring up Tim Pool and the other one, Andy No.
Okay.
I think
what unifies them?
They are people whose job it is to essentially appeal to people who have like passively liberal views, like don't be homophobic, don't be racist, and then who are disillusioned with a lot of the kind of Charlotte Climber type of stuff.
Yep. The Anita Sarkeesians type of
definitely as well.
Yeah. I actually think Eric Weinstein is a better example of that than Andy No. Andy No doesn't really do the "I'm not a conservative" thing. He's actually been fine with the conservative label, but Eric Weinstein will tell you up and down how liberal he is. Oh, I'm the most liberal guy. His brother describes himself as a radical leftist, but their politics always seem to align with the far right that bankrolls them. Eric Weinstein is an employee of Teal Capital.
Right. I mean, yeah, and I mean, my point is sort of, their job is sort of to appeal to the passively liberal people who are disillusioned with mainstream liberalism, and essentially just to convince them that actually conservatism is cool and epic.
Yeah,
and
they do it by weaponizing bad takes. Like they find the bad takes and they use them to convince people that liberals, the left wants to cut off your dick, as Craig once put it. That's their project in a nutshell.
Is that not what our conversation was leading to? I thought we were all going to agree that that's what we wanted.
Right. Yeah. And it's dangerous because it's correct. They're fundamentally correct about our desire about my personal desire to cut off every dick. Yeah.
Right.
That they're onto something.
Yeah, but what was I going to say?
I don't know. Dave Rubin.
Right. And so my position is sort of essentially coming from the point of trying to appeal to the people who have sort of got to who are susceptible to that, if you get what I mean.
Sure. Yeah. I've been admonished by people for focusing on Dave Rubin and Tim Pool, and I've been told that they're irrelevant and that I shouldn't focus on them because they don't have institutional power. Amy Therese specifically has a tweet admonishing someone for going after the IDW because I'm going to quote her exactly here. If I can find it. Come on. Oh yeah. So this is a reply to Wild Girders, classical liberal.
All right.
And he's posted a picture of the IDW in an elevator together. It's right. Weinstein, Majid Nawaz, Rubin, and Sam Harris. And he says he makes fun of them, and then Amy Therese comes in. These guys have no real power, no material influence on politics. They aren't even popping in the discourse anymore. Pretending you're heroic for disagreeing with effete liberal academic nobodies is lame as fuck, especially because your politics don't actually differ from theirs. Now, without except for the second part where people said my politics don't differ from Dave Rubin's, I've received that admonition many times that our mutual friend, all of our mutual friend Harlan Rogers used to tell this to me, that I was completely wasting my time dunking on Dave Rubin, Tim Pool, and I needed to leave them alone. I vehemently disagree with this.
I don't think it's a matter of leave them alone. I think it's a matter of you have to, if you dunk on Tim Pool, if you dunk on Dave Rubin, these guys, you sort of alienate their audience, sort of, because they see that.
Do they worry about alienating Anita Sarkeesian's audience?
No, because I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to be voting. Anita Sarkeesian's audience is going to be voting for, you know, the more progressive option anyway.
What I don't understand what you mean they're going to be voting for the progressive option. Oh no, okay, I do. So yeah, so they don't need to worry about. They can just dunk on her, and that's the same way I am about Dave Rubin. Why do I need to worry about Dave Rubin's audience of TPUSA chud?
Not necessarily. They're not necessarily like at that point yet, though. That's the problem.
I think I know Dave Rubin and Tim's audience substantially better than yours. Than you do, rather.
I also want to know why you don't want to alienate Dave Rubin's audience, but you do want to alienate Thought Slime's audience.
Yeah.
It seems like it would be easier to win over Thought Slime's audience towards your side than it would be Dave Rubin's.
No, because I mean,
bullshit to me.
No, Thought Slime's audience have sort of already made up their minds. Whereas I'm not saying that, you know, the TPUSA people. I'm not trying to get the TPUSA people. I'm trying to get the people. I'm trying to get the people that Tim Paul and such are trying to appeal to. I'm trying to appeal to them more than.
The spear. You're talking about the tip of the spear. So Dave Rubin and Tim Pool's audience have an audience. A core audience of far right people, but there's a tip of the spear that's just getting indoctrinated into this stuff.
Yes,
and that's who you're going after.
And those people
has that too. Everyone has that. Every audience has that tip of the spear.
Right. But I mean, Thought Slime's audience are sort of already on my side, if you get what I mean.
Do you think his audience is homogenous?
Already on your side.
Yeah, are they homogenous?
I mean, it depends on what I disagree with Thought Slime's audience on.
Okay.
I mean, ultimately, if it comes down to, people are being, driven to people like Tim Paul, people like Sargon, people like all this because they feel, you know, alienated by the rhetoric of you know, your Charlotte Climbers and your Anita Sarkeesians. Then what do I have to do? I can't just sit there and go, actually, you're a chud, and Anita Sarkeesians.
I'll tell you how to do it. I will tell you how to win those people over.
Go on.
You use the most powerful weapon in your arsenal.
Facts and logic? Oh, okay.
Ridicule. And that's how the right-wing YouTube machine worked. They pick these figures like Anita Sarkeesian, like what was Brianna Wu, there were about a dozen of them, right?
Right.
And they created villains out of them, right? These are two of Saul Alinsky's rules, right?
Not necessarily that they created villains out of them. I think their position came from very specifically it was very sort of a very antagonistic, culturally antagonistic position. It's the same as the Vox guy tweeting about how South Park calls the alt-right is that kind of thing.
I don't understand the distinction you're saying. I'm saying that they cultivated these characters and very, like we were talking about, farmed their bad takes and used them to create fodder for this propaganda machine.
A propaganda machine that was almost exclusively there to tell you, no, it's okay, you don't have to change anything. Yeah, you're fine. Everyone who's telling you to change, they're the wrong ones. They're just crazy. Look.
And what I'm doing online is the same thing. I'm cultivating villains and mining their content for fodder. And I'm doing the same thing. And
the thing is
over their audience, and I'll tell you why. Because people love to see someone dunked on.
Right.
People love to see someone made the object of ridicule.
Go ahead, Fooly.
But my argument there is it's not about telling people to change. I mean, obviously, because then with that you're sort of making the assumption that everyone is coming from a place of being inherently reactionary, and I don't think that's the case.
I'm not making that assumption.
No, not you. sorry, Jangles.
That's okay.
He was saying that you were saying that you're making the assumption.
I'm making the assumption that what? I'm sorry. Rephrase that, please.
You were saying that Justin is making the assumption that everyone on that side is reactionary.
I'm not saying that he's necessarily making that assumption.
I'm a big boy. If you think I'm doing that, I'm not going to yell at you.
No. I meant like it's sort of starting from the premise. I'm not saying you're making that assumption, but you're starting from that premise that people are reactionary and need to be told to change. I don't think that's the case. Obviously, like in stuff like Gamergate, there were plenty of people who were reactionary, but from my first-hand perspective, there were a lot of people who simply just resented the idea that they were being told by, an authority figure, in inverted commas, that they were reactionary and they needed to change. They needed to stop playing.
It wasn't really an authority figure, though, was it? It was Anita Sarkeesian. She's not an authority.
I mean, from an academic's perspective, right? I mean, if you're like all it is just people just don't like to be told, that they're the problem, because ultimately the problem is the structure itself.
It is kind of true, but
that's not that they don't like to hear it because they don't. People don't like to have the finger point. It doesn't have to do with their belief that the problem is the system. It has to do with their system. They don't like to be blamed.
All right, and I mean, if you look at stuff like Gamergate, a lot of the rhetoric was, we just wanted to play games. It wasn't people who mobilized around, we all hate women in video games and stuff like that. It wasn't people who just started from that position. It was a lot of people who were, resented the idea of being told how to behave, that they were behaving wrongly. And that
if we're going to talk about Gamergate, I want a theory that Gamergate was a Hillary Clinton op.
I never said that, but it was definitely coming from that place of the mentality, if you get what I mean.
What you said was I hate seeing Gamergate and Sarkeesian discourse on my timeline. The whole thing was entirely a cultural project to get people to accept a Hillary Clinton presidency. That's what you said.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't coming from Hillary Clinton or whatever, but it was from that kind of establishment.
So who was it coming from?
It was coming from the establishment, the establishment media.
So who?
Wait, the establishment media is telling itself that it's problematic?
Yeah.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Yeah, go ahead, lay it out for us.
Well, it's essentially a false dichotomy of between Polygon and Breitbart. That's sort of what was created.
Okay, now who is Polygon the establishment? I don't know.
Yeah,
Polygon.
What does establishment mean? Apparently, don't know. What does establishment mean?
Money. People with money.
People with money. But what happens if those people with money are attacking people with even more money?
I mean, that's just the same thing. I mean, you can't really codify it with that.
But so don't call it the establishment.
Well, I mean, it's, as I say, it's a false dichotomy. It's not. I mean, the idea that Vox.com which owns Polygon and Breitbart.
It's Vox Media that owns Polygon, right?
Right.
And is Polygon part of Gawker?
No, that's a separate thing.
Okay, so but Polygon's still owned by Vox. Vox Media is a pretty big company. It's actually owned by the Daily Kos guy, is one of the principals of it.
Right.
So it's a big left-wing media establishment on the internet, and then on the other side of we have Bannon, right?
Right. Well, no, because they're both batting for the same side. They're both
playing. So Bannon and Daily Kos, the Daily Kos guy, are playing for the same side.
Yep.
How so?
Well,
and that side is to elect Hillary Clinton.
No, the side is to enforce the false dichotomy. I mean, that there's only Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. when there isn't. Obviously, there's Bernie Sanders.
Wait, you understand you just introduced a false dichotomy in that sentence, right? They're on the same side?
Well, they are.
No, but it's a false dichotomy because having that thing, being opposed to disagreeing with you doesn't make them on the same side. So you're setting up a false dichotomy where people either agree with you or they're on the same side together, disagreeing with you. That's the false dichotomy.
Yeah,
like, I think it's overly simplified to say that the Daily Cause guy, Vox and Breitbart are on the same side. Because if we believe that, Bernie Sanders is on the same side too, because he also told for Hillary.
I mean, you could say that, but I mean, it's ultimately, you know, as I say, the social conflict is to do with class, the primary social conflict, and you're either on the side of one, either on one side or you're working for the other side,
or you're somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, there's different sides you can like. If you're saying you're either on one side or the other, creating a false dichotomy.
I mean, there's the problem with the middle thing is there's not really much of a middle, is there?
Yeah.
I mean, I think on the class issue, yeah, I think there is actually. I don't think there's just two sides. I think there's a spectrum. I think that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump represent different positions on that spectrum. I don't think they're just on one side or the other. I don't think they're just on the same side. I think that they're different positions.
I disagree with that. I think they're on the same side ultimately when it comes down to it.
Would you say that saying that even though they have vastly different opinions on culture and social issues and even the way to go about fixing the economy, but they're on the same side is reducing things to class?
Ultimately, no. I mean, because
the first part of that answer was very good, and the second part.
Right, hold on. Right. So, I mean, ultimately, you have a person who hates poor people and pretends to, like, you know, marginalize people versus a people who hates poor people and hates marginalized people, because you can't have both. You can't have the position that you can't. It's not really class reductionist to say that if you care about the cultural issues but you don't care about the economic issues that are intrinsically tied to that, then you're a phony. It's not really class reductionist to say that.
I think it's kind of weird to say that, like, all those people, that Breitbart and Vox are on the same side.
And if they are on the same side, then why is there a push to elect Hillary Clinton? If Trump and Hillary Clinton are the same side, who cares? Why would there be a push for Clinton? I think you overstated your premise. I think what you meant to. I think what you're getting at is that Gamergate was like some kind of like cultural diversion from class politics.
Right, and it was. That's
a more defensible position.
It was a bigger scale thing of what we talked about with the South Park tweet. It was essentially, you know, dividing people into two cultural groups, even though they might not have been like that much invested in the first place.
Okay, I do feel like you kind of backed yourself into of committing class reductionism. I do like when you just distilled the political spectrum down to
as I say, it's not class reductionist to say that it's not reducing things down to class to say that social issues are intrinsically tied into the economic implications.
But that's not what you were saying. They were on the same side. That seems to me because they're not trying to dismantle capitalism. That seems to me to be a class reductionist.
Yeah,
viewpoint.
Saying that Vox and Breitbart are on the same side, even though they are polar opposites in terms of their views on almost
I won't
everything
even agree that they're
else.
polar opposites. I mean, certainly there's further left and further right, so they're not. But they are clearly they're distinct positions from one.
I mean, you can have cultural views, but that doesn't change the fact that you're fine with the outcome, right?
Well, if you think they're on the same side, then you should be fine.
I think we're going in circles on this topic.
Yeah.
Right.
We should talk about Fuentes, but before I had a point about Amy Therese and talking about the IDW that I wanted to get to. The part of her tweet that really bugs me is where she says that you shouldn't talk about these guys because they have no real power. This like, oh, they don't have institutional power is to me a total excuse employed by that segment of the dirtbag left that essentially is the same thing as a punching down, punching up argument used by IDPOL SJW people, and it just carries no water. Those figures do have First of all, I don't even think there's such a thing as someone who doesn't have institutional power. Secondly, all of those people have substantial institutional power. It's just for using it as an excuse.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, because I feel like I've run into that argument many times from you and other people from like the dirtbag stupid poll left, and I just feel like it's a completely disingenuous argument that's used to mean whatever you say it means. And we had an argument. You admit this. You and I once had an argument where you tried to tell me that that Steve Bannon didn't have institutional power. That he was irrelevant and didn't need to be addressed.
No, I wasn't arguing that point. I don't think the it doesn't matter. He does have institutional power, but it doesn't matter what he personally thinks.
It doesn't matter how he flexes and uses that institution.
It doesn't matter his personal like moral positions because ultimately,
I'm asking what he does, how he uses that institutional power. Does that matter?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was saying. What else would I have been saying?
Well, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's sort of just like Twitter being like a bad platform for having these kind of discussions.
I guess so.
So okay, in your opinion, Fooly, who should we be going after?
Everyone to the right of Bernie Sanders. Everyone.
So Steve Bannon and they would count.
How much power do you have to have though before it's okay to go after them? How about the working class racist from my hometown? Can I go after him?
Depends what you mean by go after. I mean, obviously, it's
like, hey, dude, you're posting QAnon shit, and you're extremely like, you're scared of brown people.
QAnon is a cult, and I mean, yeah, don't alienate those people because you don't want to. What does it mean to not alienate QAnon? Their belief system, by definition, a cult-like belief system alienates you from your surroundings. That's what a cult is. Right, so don't. I wouldn't advise to exacerbate that any further.
So we should be going after everybody to the right of Bernie Sanders.
Not QAnon.
but we shouldn't attack people and tell them to change because that's an ineffective way to get them to change their mind.
We shouldn't be attacking them to get them to change. We should be encouraging them to be. The better people. We should
moralize
them. Not necessarily moralize, but essentially.
Don't we have to win over people to the right of Bernie Sanders? I mean, if Bernie Sanders is going to win an election, he's going to need people, moderate Democrats.
Well, I mean, obviously, there's a difference between the people. It depends on how aware of the premise they are. How aware, because either they are cynically they're aware that there's only really there's only ultimately a when it comes down to it, there's Bernie Sanders. It is Bernie or bust. It's socialism or barbarism, and they are cynically taking like a middle ground to sort of pull people away from Bernie, and there's people who just aren't fully aware of what's going on.
hold on, or they just have a different opinion, but they're maybe amenable to a further left position.
Right. I mean, and that's an important thing we have to recognize.
I mean, in the U.S., where we don't have like we don't have a parliamentary system, you win elections by recruiting a broad coalition of people who maybe disagree on some substantial issues, but
of course
who are willing to work with you in spite of those differences. And those include Kamala Harris supporters, they include Joe Biden supporters, and they definitely Liz Warren supporters.
I would sort of disagree with that. I think a lot of people who sort of wanted Kamala are people who are very against any form of are against socialism because it contradicts their class position.
Are you saying that you're writing them off?
I think there are definitely those people, but they're not the entire Kamala Harris coalition.
No, of course not.
You can tell who it is too, because the segment of her supporters that jumped when she dropped out, that jumped to Amy Klobuchar, that's them. Those are the PMC class that are absolutely, like, they will vote. Those people will vote Trump against Bernie. Like, mark my words,
right.
they will. But that's not her entire voting base. It's probably a fairly small amount.
Do you think that people who like AOC are never going to vote for Bernie?
No, of course. I mean, of course they are.
Okay. Do you think that people who like Elizabeth Warren would never vote for Bernie?
Depends.
On the answer to that is, of course, they would. Okay, so
not necessarily, because I think there's some people who.
Do you think that if you like Elizabeth Warren, you're going to vote for Trump?
In most cases, yes.
I'm sorry, maybe I misspoke. If you like Elizabeth Warren, you would vote. Do you think that you would vote for Trump over Bernie?
Oh, no. No, in most cases, no.
Right. Okay.
In the majority of cases, no.
So should we alienate people who like AOC or Elizabeth Warren?
No, not at all.
Okay, cool. So we can all agree that Amy Therese is a fucking idiot. Who's enormously ineffective at whatever she tries to do, right?
She does need to, I mean, I don't think she's an idiot or anything. I'm not gonna, because, I'm
gonna call her an idiot. If you like Amy Therese, this is the time to really think. I don't want to alienate you, but I would say her strategy is going to be very ineffective.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things she says, like the thing I retweeted recently, I think she's spot on with, but a lot of the things I don't agree with at all.
What was the retweet?
It was about BreadTube putting treating culture as politics is downstream from culture.
Mm-hmm.
BreadTube is used.
That's Andrew Breitbart.
Right, she says, breadtubers use purely liberal reason, conceive as class as an identity vector, and operationalize the Andrew Breitbart credo, politics is downstream from culture, to indoctrinate young people into a facile leftism functionally indistinguishable from liberalism. That's a spicy take that I do agree with.
So you think that Thought Slime is indistinguishable from a liberal?
Yes.
Despite the fact that he's an anarchist and advocates for anarchist politics and attacks liberals.
You said that his audience was already on your side, and now he's indistinguishable from a liberal. It's inconsistent.
Well, I mean, they're very.
Are you a liberal?
No, I mean they're very aware of class politics, but when they try and argue for something, it's indistinguishable from a liberal perspective.
It's interesting that she paints BreadTube with this very broad brush and doesn't draw distinctions between the different voices. I mean, there are people on BreadTube who talk about leftism and economic and material politics. There are also people like Big Joel who likes to make videos about Christmas shoes. And, I mean, that doesn't mean that he doesn't care about material politics. It means that he just wants that's what he wants to talk about. or like our friend Jose, not a J, who has a really great YouTube channel. He makes videos about like TV shows he likes. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have material class politics. It means that that's what interests him. That's what he's wanting to talk about.
So is that a bad thing? If someone just wants to use their time to talk about things like identity politics, like sexism, like homophobia, like transphobia, if that's where they want to devote their time, is that a bad thing?
Not necessarily. It depends. As I say, the identity politics thing, it depends on if you're talking about, if you mean identity politics as in concern to do with identity, which I think absolutely you should be talking about, and everyone should be talking about, versus identity conflict politics, which is
that's not what Amy Teresa's tweet doesn't use any of those language. She's talking about people who wade into culture instead of class.
Right. Let me just get the thing back.
I mean, I think to me she's talking about people like the Ellis ContraPoints who make videos, about like some movie or I don't know, whatever ContraPoint's last video was about, opulence or whatever. Like they're very like cultural.
I think the line about reducing class to just an conceive of class as an identity vector is very important in that quote.
Wait, what part was important in the quote?
Conceive of class as an identity vector, essentially reducing class down to just an identity rather than a.
Is she subtweeting someone, or does she have an example of what she's talking about? Because I'm just totally lost by what she's even referring to.
I don't think she's subtweeting anyone. It's just a quote in a screenshot that somebody else has posted. I don't know where it's from originally.
And what I'm blocked by her, so I can't. I don't.
No, it was posted on. I retweeted it. It was originally posted by Dustin TL.
Okay, I just feel like it's so telling how she'll like paint BreadTube in these extremely harsh, broad strokes, but then like when we talk about like I've got a tweet of hers about Nick Fuentes where she's like, oh, anyone who thinks that Nick Fuentes is racist is crazy. Like when she talks about the right, she talks about them in these very nuanced, accepting terms, and when she talks about the left, there's none of that. That's such a warning sign to me, and it's endemic on like the dirtbag stupid pole vector. Like I see it a lot on that side.
It seems like, and again, we don't have any better words for it. The dirtbag left are very quick to call out people on the left who are all for the cultural changes, all for social progressivism, but will definitely throw their hat in the ring with capitalists if it gets them what they want. But they're not so quick to call out the same thing on the dirtbag left, where they will throw their hat into the ring with racists and white nationalists if they're against capitalism in a way that's similar to theirs.
They don't even have to be against capitalism. Like no one thinks Nick Fuentes is capital.
No one thinks what? Sorry?
I said no. I said they don't even have to be against capitalism. No one thinks Nick Fuentes is against capitalism.
No, of course not. But obviously, people in the chat earlier mentioned about my tweet about Nick Fuentes. Yeah. That's not me. That was never me endorsing Nick Fuentes, by the way. That was me saying he is fully aware of the implications of the thing he's saying. I think I'm not like. I mean, I guess if Amy Teresa said that she's saying that. People who say that Nick Fuentes is a racist, I mean irrational. No, Nick Fuentes is pretty racist. Like, not just pretty racist, he's racist. And essentially, that he's someone that it's important to keep an eye on because he's aware of the inherent contradictions of sort of the center.
So your tweet was this Fuentes kid gets the premise, and what was the premise that he gets?
The premise that the center is based on hypocrisy and is it's a very fragile center platform to date.
So there's a Mike Cernovich tweet involved in this, and I'm also blocked by Mike Cernovich. So
Yeah, same.
what was the context here? Like what was Nick saying that showed that he gets this premise about the contradictions of the center?
Let me just find it.
All right. Yeah, while you guys do this, I want to be gone for like 3 minutes, okay?
Okay.
We'll keep things warm. Everyone in the chat, behave. I'm gonna be looking at you.
So should I read the thing?
Yeah, read it.
Okay. Probably the worst part about the socialism sucks ideology from Conservative Inc. is that it's totally ineffective for Zoomers. It's political suicide. This socialism capitalism dialectic is ancient. It's just not even relevant anymore. And then young people literally don't own anything and are looking at a life of debt and wage slavery. We're coming to terms with the consequences of globalization and industrial technological society. Virtually all forms of authentic identity, community, and tradition have been vaporized. This is the world that Zoomers.
Who's writing this? Is Nick writing this?
This is a Nick Fuentes. This is what he's posting, I guess, Telegram or something.
I had no idea Nick was so articulate.
I don't know if this is him or if this is
It's gonna turn out someone from the Dirtbag Left wrote this. Once Mike Cernovich like repeated something from or retweeted something from Anna Katchelin. I don't know how to say her last name, but Red Scare Anna's Instagram. This is going to be a rehash of this because it sounds very like it could have come from that, you know.
I mean, my position on the Nick Fuentes thing is that he's understood that premise, which is, you know, the center is nonsense. That it's a very fragile position, and what he's doing is taking that and instead of redefining it about
but he's doing so while defending Trump, though. So in that way, isn't he still aligned with that that status quo? So if he's defending Trump,
no, because he's making it about a cultural argument. He's making it about defending quote unquote traditionalism, about defending nationalism,
And that's effective for him. To go after culture?
Yes.
Yes. So
it's effective for him. It's not necessarily effective for us.
Why?
Because the right can infect any type of culture it wants.
No, it can't. It's actually kind of pretty narrow. Like, we have way more leeway with what cultures that we can...
Not necessarily, because do you not have right-wing rappers like Zerby? Do you not have, you know... There was at the Tommy Robinson free speech thing, there was a drag queen that showed up to that. I mean, the right can pretty much...
Yeah, but what do those people have in common? These quote-unquote... They're supposed to be quote-unquote representatives of a certain culture who shit on that culture.
Not necessarily. I mean...
Like, what do you mean, not necessarily?
Well, I mean, is Zuby not still a rapper?
Yes, but he's also... They're excited to have a rapper on their side because, hey, rappers are usually, like, all, you know...
it's kind of weird we're using Zuby as our rapper, not Kanye.
Who else is a right-wing rapper?
Rapper?
Kanye.
Kanye. Kinda.
I don't think... Sort of. I don't think Kanye's really...
I mean, he's wearing the MAGA hat and going to Joel Osteen's church. If that's not right wing, I don't know.
It's culturally right wing. It's culturally, you know, quote unquote culturally conservative, and that's sort of
rappers though. Like we're talking about culture. I don't understand that. You draw these distinctions. They don't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to wrap my head around, Nick Fuentes is almost all about culture. and it's apparently
Right.
really effective for him. But we can't be effective in the same way because, and that's where I'm drawing a blank.
Because we're only, if we're arguing for an idealistic version of a culture, which he's arguing for, you know, a very idealistic version of a culture that doesn't.
I would say ideological. I wouldn't say ideal.
Okay, ideological.
I get your point.
Well, I mean, by which I mean it only exists as an idea, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
when I think idealistic, I think like, oh, really positive attributes. Like,
no, that's not what I meant,
idealistic
yeah.
has a positive connotation to it.
Right.
I get what you mean. I get what you mean.
Go ahead.
But I mean, when we are
Isn't culture something that the left is pretty good at? Like, don't artists tend to be on the left? It seems like it's kind of our purview.
sort of, I mean, but the thing is with there, it's infecting a lot of different types of culture. That, I mean, you could make the argument that, you know, rap music is, I mean, somebody in chat said a lot of rappers are left wing.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't necessarily disagree. I don't agree with that. They're
You
not
don't agree
left.
with that?
No, they're not left wing. Like they're, like, a lot of rappers are very capitalist.
Oh, true.
You can be capitalist and on the left, though, in the distinction that I left out before. Like, most rappers are not like Marxists or anything, but like
That's true.
There
Sorry.
are definitely way more rappers who are outspoken about their politics, and it's left wing, than there are rappers who are outspoken about their politics and it's right wing. There's very few of those. The only one who comes to mind is Kanye, and I mean Zuby's not really even a rapper. And Kanye was on the left until very recently. He was a major contributor.
Yeah, I mean, and we can also have that. You brought up that, you know, that they get more.
50 Cent,
I forgot.
50 Cent has been aligned with the right.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yikes. But we also have like people who from quote unquote traditionally right wing forms of media that are on the left, like, you know, country singers who are on the left.
Yep.
Right.
Tim McGraw is a big Democrat.
Yes, Dolly Parton.
Oh yeah. And
Shit, like the original like person who brought banjo music into the public ethos, Pete Seeger, was a like almost a straight up
Right.
communist.
Yeah. So it just seems to me very unwarranted to say that leftists can't compete culturally, especially since if you compare BreadTube to you know, post Gamergate tube, whatever we're going to call that, compare Natalie to Carl. I mean, the creativity on display on BreadTube dwarfs what you see on the right, where it's just, you know, everyone's Tim Pool on the right, screeching into their webcam in their dirty bedroom, whereas leftists like create more something that looks more like art.
Yeah, I agree with that. But what I'm trying to get at is sort of like we can't limit ourselves to trying to infect one certain type of culture. You can't reject things like obviously South Park. You can't reject.
Oh, yeah. We're not arguing that. We're saying
No, I don't think you are.
that we can be competitive in culture on our own terms. And I don't think those terms should be scolding people for South Park. I think those terms should be, you know, something like I know you don't like any of these people, but something that like what H-Bomb does, or what Chapo does. And I know you like that's an example of us, or what Lady Gaga does. We did Gaga earlier. Like
Yeah,
what
we
she
said
does,
Lady
like,
Gaga and Glee were really effective at shifting culture.
Yeah.
Right,
Glee
yeah.
is great. Like, it doesn't have to be edgy. We're all exactly.
You're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, sorry. Star Trek is the definitive cultural television show, and had tons to say about culture and did so very effectively. Are you bad-mouthing Star Trek?
No.
Thank you.
No, because all those things are are cultural products within themselves, right? What I'm trying to discourage is the idea that there is a correct culture that we need to promote, and there is bad reactionary, irredeemable culture that you should be ashamed of for enjoying. And I don't think either of you are saying that, but I'm saying it's something we should be aware of, and we should
like when Movie Bob said that Chapo was reactionary because they didn't like
right.
That's
right.
one of my all-time favorite. This is an absolute classic.
Yeah, exactly. Just avoid doing stuff like just don't do what Movie Bob does. Just don't do, because people don't like Movie Bob, and there's a good reason they don't like Movie Bob.
What specifically does Movie Bob do that you don't like? Like put that point to a T. Don't do what?
He's one of these people who, like, I mean, like the meme I created that was appropriated by Paul Joseph Watson. He's the consumer. His political opinions are based in cultural products, consuming cultural products.
There's an excerpt from Mark Fisher's Capitalist Realism that reminded me of your Movie Bob the consumer meme, which is capitalism is what is left when the beliefs have collapsed to the level of ritual or symbolic elaboration, and after all that is left is the consumer spectator trudging through the ruins and relics. That describes Movie Bob to a T.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It should also be said that Movie Bob is like actually a genocidal eugenist.
Yeah.
Like it's like that sounds like a crazy thing to say, and he's vehemently denied it, but it's like he compulsively tweets this stuff out. It's not really in his videos, but on Twitter, like it's like he can't help himself. He has to say these like crazy things about militaries overturning democratic elections and stopping people and outlawing people from voting and institution. He has a tweet where he praises. He says it's too bad we don't use eugenics anymore. He has a tweet where he says it's too bad we don't have like poll taxes and reading tests anymore. Like Movie Bob actually does have horrific repellent politics. It can't be said loudly enough.
And the thing is, my take has always been, he says the things that he says the things out loud that your average MSNBC viewer, your guys like Noah Balatsky, would rather keep quiet. He is those people without a filter. He like all of them believe this.
I think there's some truth to that. I'm not sure if Noah Berlansky is a MSNBC type though. Isn't he more left than that?
He's a little bit.
Cultural politics.
If you're saying that like the average MSNBC voter is bad because they don't actually care about people who don't think like them. Like they don't want health care because it's good for people not to die. They want it because it's they're very quickly to wish bad things to happen to Trump voters. That's something that Movie Bob does a lot, right? He like yes. Right-wing voters and Trump voters deserve what they get.
Amber Frost once put it as starving them woke, and that sums it up really well.
Starving them woke.
Starving them woke. That's brilliant.
Well, Amber can be quite clever. I haven't really recent term, but she can be quite good, and I will read her book when it.
Yeah,
and I would definitely say that that's a terrible way to do things. If you don't want good things to happen to your political enemies, then you don't really care about those good things. You just want to win. If you don't want free education for everybody, you're in this to win. If you don't want Medicare for all, you're in this to win. If you don't care about, if you are fine with climate change happening, as long as it hurts the people who voted against doing something about it, you're in this to win. So I think the fundamental place you need to come from is empathy. And right.
And I mean that empathy and solidarity, I think, are core left values that I see the dirtbag left failing on quite frequently.
Pretty bad, yeah.
What do you mean?
Like, for example, saying that you hope only bad things happen to someone who is on your side because he doesn't do things the way that you want them to.
Well, that's me speaking out of frustration because...
Does that matter? The answer to that is no.
No. And I mean, but ultimately my position on the cultural thing is that, you know, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about cultural conflict politics, is the stuff like what Movie Bob does. And it's not just people like Movie Bob, that does spill over into, you know, sort of more left-wing spaces as well.
Can I ask you something that you said about Movie Bob once that we kind of had an argument about? You said that. Let me find it here. You said that Bob represents the cultural establishment. Bob is MSNBC. Wait, that's not where it was. Okay, here. I'm sorry. This is it. Making fun of Bob Chipman is the only credible left-wing cultural critic. I took issue with that.
It's, I mean, as a like, talking about a cultural project from the perspective of as in something new, as in something, as in, if you want to, I mean, this comes into my thing about, you know, cultural responses, right? So, like, obviously we've always had, up until a point, like in history, we've had counterculture that critiques the dominant culture, right?
Well, at the same time relying on it, yeah.
Right. And I mean, this is an Alan Moore thing from a video that he was in, where he's talking about essentially, he's talking about it's just called Inside
Alan Moore, welcome to my TED Talk.
He's talking about counterculture, and essentially the.
Was this a recent video?
This was from about a year or so ago.
Yeah, interesting.
Is
it like some TV show or something? Like what? Like I'm just looking for some background.
I think so. I think it was like from some European TV show.
Okay, I'll stop derailing. I'll look for it myself later on. Thanks.
I'll link it to you in a bit.
Cool,
basically, he's talking about, you know, we always had some sort of cultural response, and that critiqued the original, the existing culture, where he says Marxism is the only way of critiquing capitalism, counterculture is the only way of critiquing
culture.
Yeah, exactly.
The mainstream culture.
Right, exactly. And
okay, so what does that have to do with Movie Bob?
Well, as we've said, he's sort of like he is your, you know, as Mark Fisher put it, the guy who just consumes and stuff.
Yeah, living in the relics of culture. Yeah, the consumer living in the relics of culture. But my rebuttal to this is that, yeah, dunk on Movie Bob, but there are all kinds of things culturally we should be commenting on. Why would it be only Movie Bob? That's crazy. And I know it's not. I don't take you literally, but I do.
Right.
There's something behind that statement that I want to critique, because when people go after those on the right, you are oftentimes very critical. Or when bread tubers make their videos about Roseanne, you're very critical. But Movie Bob is allowed, and I just find that to be a ridiculous standard.
Who's Roseanne?
Roseanne Barr. She had a very popular sitcom in the '90s that actually came back recently.
Oh, right. Yeah, that Roseanne.
Because our friend Jose did a video about.
I don't remember criticizing anyone for doing a video on Roseanne.
It was an example based on a video.
Right.
But I mean, okay, but you agree with Amy Therese in attacking BreadTube for their focus on culture, and I think that culture is something we should be commenting on it.
I think there is a difference between how someone like there's a very big difference between how someone like Angie Speaks, who I think is a really good left tuber, comments on culture, and someone like Jack Saint comments on culture.
You don't like Jack Saint? I haven't seen any of his videos.
I don't like Jack Saint.
I like Jack Saint quite a bit. What's your problem with Jack Saint? I like him quite a bit. What's your problem with Jack Saint?
Well, speaking about his videos, is they're very intentionally conflict. I mean, the most recent thing, like he got criticized from the quote unquote dirtbag left for, was the video about Skylar White
from Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
What did he say about Skylar White?
I think the title of the video was something like "Why you hate Skylar White" or something like that.
Well,
And she was a character who received a lot of really negative attention. Why do you hate Skylar White? Question mark. Jack Saint.
Right. Do you not see why that can be? Because that's obviously a question directed at a certain type of person. That's obviously, you know, it's
I don't even think it is directed at a certain type of person. I think it's a recognition. I haven't watched the video at all. I just think I interpret that to be a recognition of the negativity and the unpopularity of her character, who did receive a lot of negative feedback.
Yeah, from what it's been a while since I watched that video,
I
but
at the time thought it was misplaced too, because the role of Skylar White in that show was to give it. If he wasn't married to Skylar, then the show wouldn't be as fun, because he wouldn't have to sneak around all the time. Like a show without Skylar and without a family, that's just about a guy selling meth. That's not interesting. The idea is that he's a normal family guy with a regular job who starts selling meth. That's exciting. And to have that dynamic, you need to have Skylar. So I always thought that the feedback against her was misplaced.
yeah, that's a.
Right.
I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that video whatsoever.
My problem with it is it's about how the audience reacted to culture, rather than why the culture exists in the first place. And
So you think that? But that's it. He's exploring why you hate Skylar White.
But
yeah, it seems like you have these really fixed ideas about the things that we are should be commenting on the left, and I just don't see anything to support it or behind it. I don't know. I think that people, I want when people go on YouTube, I want them to see leftist content, and so I want to support people making it. If I don't, and that means making videos about what they're interested in.
Right. I just think it's very, very culturally divisive. Like it's intentionally trying to create or exacerbate cultural divisions.
So you don't like antagonism?
No, because that's going to turn people off, isn't it?
Antagonism's going to turn people off?
Yeah.
I'm just going to let that sit for a second. All right, so okay.
Do you see the irony?
I do actually, yeah.
Okay.
Because the reality of it is, what else is there when it's just literally just constant antagonism? You can't just sit there and be like, oh well, actually, I'm trying to be like, I'm trying to have all of the conversations. Not all of the conversations, but, you know, I'm trying to include all of the people. I'm trying to appeal to everyone. You're never going to appeal to everyone. Exactly. I don't like antagonism, but I engage in it because what?
Yeah. Why do you engage?
Because there's no other choice.
Sure there is.
Okay, so does that justify Jack Saint's antagonism? Which I'm not even sure. I haven't seen the videos. So I don't know. I don't think the title was antagonistic.
Yeah, when you say there's no other choice, what do you mean?
Well, how else do I get my point across? How do I appeal to your people who are perceptible to the kind of people who are perceptible to stuff like, who aren't on board with, but are perceptible to things like Tim Pool, because they don't like people like Anita Sarkeesian, and they're not going to like people like Fort Slime. How am I going to appeal to those people without intentionally being antagonistic and, you know, shocking and sort of just like dismissive of people like Fort Slime?
Yeah.
You know what? No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Yeah, I mean, if you are perceived as someone on the left and you're shitty to other people on the left in front of a right-wing audience, that seems to be a very effective way at, like, gaining a following and, like... You understand where I'm coming from, right? Like, I don't think... I don't want this to be a
I'm not
drama
trying to gain a
stream.
right wing. I'm trying to people who are turned off by people like Sarkeesian and people like Thought Slime aren't necessarily inherently right wing. They're not necessarily inherently that.
I agree with that, but I think it's kind of questionable to like Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there are people on the left that I have negative things to say about. I can't really ding you for that. I don't really know that much about Thought Slime and Jack Saint, so I can't say. I had a tweet the other day that was negative. Museum received a lot of hate. I don't know, but I guess I can't really criticize you for that necessarily. But I think that what you've got to do is you've got to, if that's all you've got, then you don't really have very much there. What it's very easy for that to turn into pandering to a right-wing audience.
But I'm not pandering to a right-wing audience. I'm not.
Well, you
I'm not
saying
saying.
that you sort of are.
No, I'm pandering to people who are turned off by moralism and people who don't want to be told.
They're not. Those people are not turned off by moralism, because if you check out like Gamergate YouTube or whatever, there's quite a bit of moralizing.
Right. Well, it depends on what you mean.
Well, there's a lot of reliance on moral language. Like the SJWs are the bad guys, are the good. They employ those kind of constructs all the time. Our friend Timba on Toast, who you said you liked him, but you wouldn't watch his Dave Rubin series. He actually addresses this. He points out that Dave Rubin is actually, one thing he's adept at is using moral in his videos to prime his audience, and he has a lot of good examples of that. And again, in Sargon's videos, in Blair, what's Blair White doing now? She's railing against Onision and Jessica and Eve. They are bad people, but like she's saying, oh, look at these terrible people, we're better than them. Now I agree with her moralizing that, but she is using moral language, and it's similar to the language that they will apply to Anita Sarkeesian and Zoe Quinn, who I have quarrels with both of them, but I'm not sure that Blair White and Sargon are better. But they're the same moral constructs to justify.
But you see why that because somebody in the chat earlier said something about has anyone considered that the reason that right-wing commentators are successful despite zero effort is because their fans were already reactionary anyway? Sometimes it's just not the left's fault. Sometimes the consumer/viewer/voters are generally just bad. I don't agree with that. I think that that's just sort of saying that there's a section of society that are inherently reactionary.
I find it kind of reductionist as well, to be honest. I'm not a fan of that comment.
Right.
I didn't see it, but maybe it's by a friend of mine. I feel bad, but on its own, I don't that sentiment either. And I think that we have to. I think it sort of lets us off the hook a little bit.
Let's who off the hook?
It lets us as leftists off the hook for our responsibility to present our ideas and kind of win on the merits of them. It lets us off the hook in the marketplace of ideas. It's very important
right.
as a logic guy. And when I call myself a logic guy, I'm not being self-deprecating.
All right, I think we could talk for hours, but no. Let's finish with. Since this is a symposium, how do we move forward? I think all three of us are on the same side, but all three of us have different approaches. So what should we do to work together to go forward?
Can I go first? Because I have a short answer.
Yes.
Put down the bell hooks, pick up the Saul Alinsky.
Okay. Very simple, eloquent. Yeah. Well done.
Thank you.
How about you, Fooly?
Generally just doing more stuff like this, recognizing that, the not everyone is cynical. Not everyone is just a bad person. I'm not, you know, sitting here going like, hold on, just a sec.
Excellent production values on your end. It really sounds.
What?
Sorry, I'm back.
There we go. Okay, you continue.
So, Fooly, it sounds kind of like your idea is to more YouTube content.
Is more what? Sorry.
It sounds like your idea to move forward is to make more YouTube.
To make more YouTube content.
Yeah,
But include more, have more dialogue between the quote unquote SJW left and the quote unquote dirtbag left, right?
Absolutely. I agree with that
What about
100%.
the right? And what about right?
What about the right?
I mean, personally, I would include them too. I want to have more dialogue. Well, I think Justin
Depends.
does a really good job.
I mean,
like this channel.
Depends on who the right are. I mean, definitely people like
Mark, you love him.
Yeah, I love him. No, I don't. Like, I love the fact that he's very consistent on the free speech thing. I think people should recognize that, you know, he's said the stuff about the two rappers getting banned from performing. I think a lot of people on the right would turn around and suddenly like walk that back and be like, oh, actually they're talking about killing people, so it's not a violation of free speech. You get me?
Yeah, I'm actually not familiar with that controversy. Does that have to do with that movie? And like they got pulled because there was like a machete fight, which I don't know very much about. I'm repeating things.
I'm not sure. It was specifically about
because I feel like that movie was about like a.
No, it wasn't a movie. It was two rappers in the UK.
Yeah, but I think there was a movie about. I don't know what I'm talking. Sorry.
Well, it was about it was essentially two rappers, UK drill rappers, got banned from performing music, and he made a video and saying, "Yeah, this is a violation of their free speech." So I give him props for being consistent, but I don't like the fact that he's going on Twitter going, "Oh yeah, Jeremy, an anti-Semite." I have problems with that, but I think he's coming from a place of genuine. I think he sincerely believes the things he's saying. I don't think he's like cynically like weaponizing the free speech thing like Dave Rubin does. Like,
I think he's more sincere than Dave.
Yeah.
Now we got an argument where I said that that free speech was an important part of the culture war, and it was an important cultural issue. And you apparently didn't see it that way.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, in a sense that it's being weaponized by the right. I agree with that.
But regardless of that, because free speech is a cultural.
I don't think so. Free speech
and have a platform is not a cultural issue.
It's a multifaceted issue. It's a legal issue. It's a issue of
You just talked about two rappers being shut down. How is that not a cultural issue?
Well, I mean, from a legal perspective, it's it is a cultural issue.
So there's laws protecting free speech. That doesn't make it not a cultural issue. I mean, there's also laws about IP. Like that's a cultural issue too. Like, is IP a cultural issue?
Sort of. I mean,
what do you mean, sort of?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. I interrupted you while you were supposed to be. I shouldn't have interrupted.
The question was how do we go forward? What should we do as people on the left / leftists, whatever you are on that spectrum? What should we do? What should we do to move forward and build a stronger coalition?
One, have more conversations like this. Include more, diverse viewpoints. Sort of
viewpoint diversity.
Yeah. Don't just assume that someone like someone who's saying the things I'm saying is is trying to signal boost like he's trying to bring over like bad people into the left and try and, because I'm not doing that. I'm obviously not doing that. I'm sort of just like trying to appeal to people who might be vulnerable to bad ideas, and I don't think the current ways of doing that are very effective, if you get what I mean.
I am unironically in favor of viewpoint diversity, I will say.
Right. I guess just understand that it's we're ultimately arguing for, what was it? I'm gonna quote Amber's latest piece about this thing. This is first and foremost a campaign to democratize the economy and build working class power, not a moralist crusade to convert every American cultural etiquette and private language of a self-appointed left. People do not need to be lectured on how to be good people, because people are already good, and we like them and we care about them, and we deserve better. They deserve control over their lives, the wealth they produce, the political machinery of this country. It's just about, like, honestly, trying not to be cynical, trying not to be someone like Movie Bob.
I think that Amber quote was much better and more eloquent about how Remainers are racist.
Right. I like the other one, the Remainers one as well, because it was spicy. See, someone in the chat is going, hell yeah, class reductionism. Yeah, hell yeah, class reductionism. Why not?
Why not?
Yeah, why not? At this point, let's just ironically, no. Yeah.
Okay, let me tell.
That's my take. Go
All
on for
right,
it.
so here's what I think, and tell me what you guys think of it. So I have just coined a term that it might be my strategy going forward, called empathetic antagonism. So
Okay.
it has 3 things that I've written down here. So when you are talking to someone who doesn't necessarily share your views, don't attack their views because it's bad. Appeal to a better way and give evidence. So say, well, my way of doing it might be better at achieving what you really want, and here's the evidence to prove it. Because what we all want is usually some sort of a better life. 2, show strength through empathy. Strength and empathy are not opposites of each other. Show that the reason I am willing to put up with a lot of shit because I care about other people. Right. Caring about other people makes you strong. Reinforce that concept that I am strong because I want good things to happen to people. I don't want bad things to happen to people. And 3, create a message that people want to spread. We are only one voice. We are very ineffective by ourselves. But if we can build a community that spreads this message, that creates a message that people want to spread, we should encourage people who are small voices to rise up so we can get a more diverse viewpoint. We should encourage other people to spread their own voices, to be vocal about what they think, and create a safe environment, ironically, a safe space, if you will, in order to express opinions. That way we can go back and forth until we find something that works out the best. What we shouldn't do is attack one another to shut us down.
Right. Attack their position, not the people.
I'll just say that I'm furious at that, because you ripped it all off from my ideas that I came up with months ago, that I can summarize in one sentence: lovable science nerd with shitposter characteristic.
There we go.
your bio that I wrote several months ago. I mean, you just ripped it off.
I did. I stole, well, yes. like most good ideas, I stole it from Logic Guy.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
See, you created a message worth sharing.
Yeah, I mean, you said some good things.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing in there I disagree with. I would just add on to the end of it that, you're not gonna convince people solely through, facts and logic. You do need to, like, properly relate to them on a personal level. You need to have a bit of banter. You need to,
I mean, you can,
it's worth learning the rhetorical triangle.
Other than relating to personal things, you can also do it by being mean and using ridicule. That is ultimately holding someone up for ridicule and humiliating them is an extremely persuasive tactic.
It just has to come from a place of I'm ridiculing you because you're going to hurt somebody else, and I want you to stop that.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
That's where it has to come from.
Hold on. Ridiculing people doesn't persuade the person you're ridiculing. It persuades those who are watching it happen.
Right, of course.
Absolutely.
Of course, yeah. All right. I think y'all.
This was a good stream.
I think it was a good conversation. Thank you both for coming on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was really,
Thank you,
it's really great to
Poston.
talk to you for the first time, Fooly.
You too.
Yeah, I hope this creates something good going forward. I hope that we can like build some bridges that may have been burned down in the past. And,
Definitely.
Yeah, and unironically, I hope that we can create just a little bit of a corner where good ideas are spread, and we can like work with each other.
Definitely.
Fooly, did you call Chud Logic a Nazi?
No, someone else did.
Oh, okay. Someone else. Okay, all right. I guess I'll leave it at that.
I don't agree with calling him a Nazi, but someone did call him something that I do agree with.
We were so close.
He is a Radlib Kekistani. That's him. He's a Kekistani.
Okay.
Chud Logic,
Well, did
Kekistan president.
you think he was like a racist or something?
We were so close to ending on a positive note. This is actually.
Yeah.
I looked at the chat.
Don't look at the chat. Never look at the chat.
I shouldn't have looked at the chat.
Unironically, though, like you should. I think a lot of the stuff that you described and a lot of the things that I described, that is what people like Chud are trying to do, and I want to bring people together. I don't like seeing this people who could be effective on their own but are at odds with each other. Like, you're going to do way more together. So it has a lot of ego to swallow, a lot of things to put aside, because what are your actual principles? Is it to help people? Which I hope it is. The reason you're into leftism is to help people, is to make people have a better life. So let's start small, help the people around us. Don't harm people who aren't all the way in line with you yet. Always come from a place of empathy.
This is so true. This is why I've been reaching out to people with my Amy Klobuchar memes all week.
There we go. All right, guys. I'm going to end the stream right now. Thank you guys so much for coming. I actually do think it was a good conversation, so I appreciate it.
I do too. I thought it was very good.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, for showing up in the chat. I did not watch chat the entire time. I hope it wasn't too spicy. But I'll go back and watch it, and I'll see if I am going to regret not drinking today. So, all right. Y'all have a good one.
All right.
Yeah.
Take care.
You too.